The burnout, I can feel it where I start losing motivation for things.
Mhm.
The day to day, the movements, the work just no longer were fun. If anything, I started getting irritated, frustrated with the things I
Yeah.
normally wouldn't have. I remember one time I was being in practice, and I always said that, if I ever felt a way there where I wasn't having fun in practice or was getting annoyed with patients too often. I mean, we get annoyed with patients all the time, but when it just kept on like every single person or every single person who said something and it was irritating you, that's when I realized I'm like, okay, there's something going off here. All right, welcome to another edition of Wabi Sabi. Got a big question for you, Jim. Have you ever experienced burnout?
Have I ever experienced? Yeah, multiple times actually. I have. I've definitely
Wow.
felt.
Okay.
Yeah, I have felt burnt out, and I think it's not unusual for people who are ambitious, who try different things, who try and scale mountains sometimes without necessarily thinking about the plan first. It's not unusual in the entrepreneur space, for example. It's very common. So, short answer, yes, Laurence. What about you?
Yeah, definitely. I definitely have a couple times as well. Like there's definitely moments of burnout. I remember the very last burnout I ever had was during COVID. I remember,
Yeah.
I got to this point where I thought I could handle it in terms of the lockdowns and just being, secluded. I'm like, I'll ride through this. But, after a few weeks, I really felt myself just being closed in. My mindset was closed in. I can feel it. Everything was just not going right, and I knew I had to do something. And this is probably, we're talking about a year and a half into COVID, because in Australia it was a little bit different when we were going through it. I mean, we didn't experience the harsh reality of business, but from a freedom perspective, that wasn't until much later in the process. So I think there was the fatigue of like the business side of things, but then there's also the fatigue of, then the added lockdowns and all that stuff. And I remember really being in a position going, okay, something has to shift. So let's talk about that burnout. Like what do you think, what are I'm sure everybody who has been in the game long enough would have experienced some sort of burnout or come close to it. What are some of the symptoms of burnout? Maybe we start with that, because some people might not acknowledge they have burnout.
I think there's an element of you feel infallible and you can just keep going without recharging your batteries. And recharging your batteries can mean physically, emotionally, mentally, and you're effectively making basically withdrawals out of an account that's going into overdraft energetically, so to speak. So to me, I think that's a very broad, all-encompassing perspective that you can look at from multiple ways. But to me, fundamentally, burnout is going beyond what your sustainable levels of capacity can maintain for a period of time.
How did it show up for you? Like, what were some of the things that you recognized? Did you realize it right away, or did it take a little while to recognize, like, oh man, I'm not in a
so there's different. And you know what's interesting, you said about COVID and the period and lockdown, I definitely feel like I experienced that as well. It was a drawn out process. I think I channeled, I'll go back to strategies, in a moment. But that was definitely, I could definitely understand what you're talking about. There was the lockdown fatigue that came through with that. I think for me, it was, I liken it to when I was 40, I ran a marathon, and they talk about hitting the wall when you're running a marathon, where no matter what you do, you feel like you hit a wall and you can't push through it. And for someone like myself who that was a strategy, it was like, if I come up against a resistance, I'm going to take a longer run up and smash through it. I finally got to a wall that I couldn't smash through.
Interesting.
And I could not, it's almost like I couldn't lift myself physically. My brain felt disconnected to my body, and I just didn't feel like I had any connection to my internal capacity to keep going. That's what burnout felt like to me.
Okay. Yeah, I think for me, like the burnout, I can feel it where I start losing motivation for things. The day to day, the movements, the work just no longer were fun. And if anything, I started getting irritated, frustrated with the things I normally wouldn't have. I remember one time I was being in practice, and I always said that, if I ever felt a way there where I wasn't having fun in practice or was getting annoyed with patients too often. I mean, we get annoyed with patients all the time, but when it just kept on like every single person or every single person who said something and it was irritating you, that's when I realized I'm like, okay, there's something going off here. Something's not right. And those are the major symptoms that for me, recognizing that I'm probably either gone through a process or I'm fatigued without actually realizing it.
Yeah, I think same. Actually, I as you said that, it took me back to times and episodes where, it, basically in the former life when I was practicing, I would get to the point of being burnt out. And I was the same. Normally, I wouldn't be irritated by things, and suddenly little things or habits or behaviors of other people were really starting to get to me. And I knew it wasn't them, it was me.
Mm.
And I'd gone too long without recharging my batteries. And I look back on it, they were usually the times that I'd delayed or rescheduled or pushed away, I should say, a break that had been planned, and consequently just felt like it was just work, 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 and no fun and joy and downtime to help recharge those batteries.
Well, then that leads to the next point, right? Next question, which is like, how do we, what are actually some of the symptoms what are some of the things that lead up to a burnout? You kind of alluded to it, is usually a break. For me, it's that break. It's every single time I think about all the burnouts I've ever had, it's always like, I didn't take the time to recover or rest. Like we all go through this circadian rhythm every single day that we're supposed to, work hard, and then we, recharge and refuel, which is basically food that we eat, but also ensure that we get proper sleep so that we actually, are back to recover for the next day. And those are the things that I know in life, is that if I don't, I remember this one year where I didn't travel very much. I think it was probably about 14 years ago when my daughter was first born, and dealing with the first newborn, being a new father, a new parent, it's just like all the things that you just didn't know what to do. And I remember that year being really tough, not just for all those new moments and like lack of sleep and everything else, but I also recognized that's the year that I didn't travel the least in since my adult life, or after school life at least. And I made a story. Maybe it's a story, I don't know what it is, but for me, I recognized it was like, oh, I took one trip this year, and I just felt that my body, my brain, it was mostly my brain. It wasn't my body so much. It was my brain was just fatigued. And so I made a vow to myself that from then on, I'm like, no matter what, I am going to make an effort to make sure I take 3 to 4 breaks a year. So every quarter I would take a break, whether it's a short break, it could be a long weekend. I don't have to travel, just like something that I can spend some time being away. And I made that conscious effort, and which meant with a new baby, I had to go, no, that's more important than making the excuses I can't travel because I got a young child. And so from then on, my kids have been traveling since they were young. And we never made any excuse. We traveled the world with the kids. And it's funny, on another side topic here, a lot of people ask, they say, oh man, I can't travel anymore because with kids. I'm like, why not? Because it is that.
Well, you've just come back from a break, right?
I did.
You've just come with. Tell us about that, because I saw on the on your social profile and reaching out to you, you look like you had a ball, and importantly, you had a trip with other families as well. What was that like?
Yeah, so I had an opportunity to rent out a super yacht, and I know this seems like ostentatious and luxury, but
that sounds horrible, man.
Yeah, it was tough. Well, listen, committing to a super yacht is scary and daunting, because it's quite a bit, obviously, because you got to commit not knowing who's going to join you. And then so I just put it out there and going, okay, I'm going to fill this boat. There's 18 rooms. I'm going to have to get, close to 40 people here on this boat. And anyway, so I reached out to some entrepreneurial friends and somehow we able to I wanted to bring my kids though. I didn't want to just leave the kids at home. I go, who's stupid enough to be able to go on a trip on a super yacht, pay the amount of money to go on a super yacht together, travel around Croatia for a week, with a bunch of kids and families. And sure enough, there was 8 families that I happen to know. And we went on this boat, 38 of us, 20 of them were kids. So we had more kids on the boat. I think the staff were pretty stressed out. Let me tell you, they were probably experiencing burnout in the beginning of the season because they never dealt with kids on a boat before, right? They're all fully adults, sitting down, drinking, a glass of wine, whatever. No, these kids are running around like, jumping on furniture and they're trying to serve food, like navigating through these kids, ages from like 6 to 16. So it was pretty tough. But going back to burnout, I recognize how amazing going away is. And I think it is the same thing for you. This is one of the reasons why we run retreats, right? We run retreats because we want to take people outside of their comfort zone in terms of their family, their home city, and their work environment, so they can actually really focus in on finding time for themselves. And this is
Yeah.
why we do things in locations that typically where people don't live, is because we want to make sure they come out and make the investment in themselves. It's not just about visiting those locations, but actually getting out of your own current locations. Because I think new
Yeah.
ideas, new thought patterns don't come from the existing environments, and moving different
You're right.
environments is the most important thing.
Yeah, because you allow ideas to germinate and take form when you're in a different environment. You start thinking at things. You look for different connections between things. And I agree with you totally. That was the realization that I got to. And I think for me, when I say multiple times, that first year of practice that I first worked in, I think I first experienced that as a first case. And that's when I got very, very clear of what work and success was going to look like from then on, because I effectively just doubled down on one metric of it, and that was graduate, hit the ground running, go. And I did. And when I look back now, I was working 7 days a week, and I did that for nearly 18 months.
Wow.
I didn't have a day off in 18 months, and I was on a plane 3 days a week, flying, traveling to remote parts of the country, not shutting down, not slowing down. And I got to it where, and here's the thing, and I share this story with a lot of people that I coach and work with. When I say at the end of the first year, I absolutely smashed it on metrics in terms of busier than I'd ever been. Practice just boomed, and yet I got to the end of it and I went, I hate this. I don't want to do this anymore. It's because I didn't honor the important parts of all parts of myself rather than just one metric. So, it's a very common thing, and I always share this story with people because I let them know that you can keep doing things for a certain period of time and you will be okay with it up until the point where, as you said, there's going to be some slippage or the cracks will start showing up, and you turn around and say, I can't do this anymore. I don't want to do this anymore. I need to change.
Well, I think it's a lot of times burnout happens, I feel, is that people kind of focus more on the destination than the journey itself. So we all have a goal, we all have a destination of dream of what we want. And sometimes we're so focused on that journey. And so like the yachts, for example, like just every day we're going to a different destination. And there was the last couple of days, it was rough weather. Like it was, because it was raining, the sea was quite choppy, unseasonably choppy for that time of year in Croatia. But the journey was horrible. Like it wasn't nice. Like, half the boat was kind of seasick and had to deal with that, dealing with those rough waves. So one of the things that happens is that sometimes we have a destination, we go, okay, if we get there or when we get there, we're going to be happy. Then that's what most of the times we do. We focus on the destination thinking that's going to make us happy. But the reality is it's actually, yes, that's part of the puzzle, but the rest of the puzzle is actually the journey itself. Was it actually fun? And was it enjoyable? And fun doesn't necessarily mean was easy. I mean, like fun did you enjoy the process? So like, think about like our workouts, whether you're doing jiu-jitsu or, doing CrossFit or marathon or whatever, like you don't enjoy the process from a physical point of view, but you do enjoy like doing tough things, for example, right? So I'm not saying everything has to be enjoyable from a easy perspective or a fun perspective, but it has to be enjoyable. So I think the ride to a goal can be hard, but if you enjoyed the process of it, then I think that leads to less burnout. Whereas if you actually get to a position where you work so hard, but you actually gave up so much, that's not enjoyable.
And that's the thing. And I think that was the realization in hindsight after that first year that I realized was I was basically neglecting values that were important to me in the pursuit of a specific objective and goal. And I realized that that's not sustainable. It's akin, you mentioned a marathon earlier on, it's akin to taking one breath and trying to run a marathon. You just can't do it, right? You run out of puff eventually. So to me, the realization when you talk about families and going away on holidays, I've done that as well. And they were great and awesome. And sometimes it's really funny because I'd feel like I was getting tired. I was looking forward to a break and I might have felt a little bit burnt out. And I don't know if you ever noticed it, but the week before a break, suddenly I was in a zone. I was in flow and I was going, great, now I'm going to go on break and now I'm in flow. And it's a really weird thing, but I think it was because I was looking forward to a break that I could actually relax and just enjoy that process a little bit more, knowing that on the other end of this week, there'll be some downtime. And That's the realization I had to get to.
Well, that's one of the reasons why I actually plan my breaks,
Same. Yeah.
beforehand, because I don't want to reach burnout and then plan for a break because I'm already exhausted. I'm already tired,
Yep.
and I don't want to feel like that. I want to make sure, like, when I plan a break ahead of time, I know this is what I have to get to. I just got to go, okay, well, it's between here and now to July, or that's when the next break is. And then you kind of go through that brain process. I'm like, okay, well, I just got to work this hard. And so you almost want to plan these breaks well in advance before the burnout actually occurs. And if you can do
Yep.
that, it will never happen. And that's so important. The second thing I want to make a comment on what you sort of said is that I think a lot of people, unfortunately, feel like, I'm burnt out, I need a break. So then they go on a break, and then they enjoy themselves so much on the break, they actually don't want to come back, right? Or the break isn't just to kind of give you a bit of relief. The break is supposed to recharge you to be excited to come back. And so what you do in the break is such an important thing. And what you decide to have a break on is going to be such an important part, because you're supposed to use that break as a launching pad to reset your body and your mind and your spirituality, so that you can actually go and want to tackle the next project or the next thing you're trying to do. But most people kind of look forward to a break, and the break, they look so forward to the break itself that they have the break, but then they realize, like, I don't want to go back to the thing I used to do. Or I might just go that they actually, they don't realize that they should be setting the next break and be excited. And that's a problem, I think. And it's just, that only leads to further burnouts. And you'd actually then lead to a point of not enjoying your life, not enjoying your career, not enjoying your project. And you create stories. I'm like, oh, maybe I shouldn't be here. And you spend the next 6 months to a year questioning your position or what you're doing. And then it kind of creates that spiral. And it all stems from you just not taking care of yourself in the process of getting to your destination.
Yeah, you made a great point there, Laurence, about if you're not enjoying your life. I think that first and foremost, we have to get to a point where we're enjoying what we're doing. And when I say enjoying, but feeling like it's meeting my values, I'm making a difference, it's purposeful, etc., etc. That's a really important thing, because for people who don't, breaks are like an escape from reality, right? But for people who love what they do, they get to the point where they go, I just need to recharge. And I know in myself, same sort of thing. When I was going away on breaks, I'd go for a run. I'd have all these ideas going through my head. And I would bet that the break that you've had, you've probably gone, I've got all these ideas that have come through my head. Why? Because you created that environment where you could incubate those. But to me, I couldn't get ideas down fast enough. So I had this agreement. I'd go for a run. I'd just come home and I'd write everything down, because my brain would just do that. And my team would know I came back from a break. Oh boy, here we go. Buckle in, because we're going for a ride. And we would have record weeks every time we would come back, because I was like, boom, I'm good to go. Let's go. And so that, to me, it was a case of just re-energizing as opposed to escaping.
Yeah. Well, that's a really critical point, right? If you're escaping and you know that when you're on break, then it's something not to do with the break or not a lack of break. It's actually something that you've been doing in your work. And there's something's not fulfilling, or you're out of alignment, or you are not incongruent to the values that, got you there in the first place. So I think it's important to use that break, not to escape, but to actually reevaluate your work and going, where am I not happy? Where am I incongruent? Where are my values that I'm not aligning with? And work on those things, because otherwise you're constantly escaping, and you're just really spending 80% of the time doing something you don't love and just enjoying your breaks, trying to escape from reality. And it's not a fun thing to do.
And I've read some commentary around this is really helpful, is that a lot of the times when people don't find joy in their day-to-day, they experience burnout, and they will find substances or experiences to numb or to escape from their current reality, so that then all they're doing is sustaining themselves to the best of their ability in an environment that's toxic to them. And if they would change that, their breaks, their habits would change as well, because they're not trying to get away from something. They would find basically an energizing process of recharging by going on breaks as well. And just like you, that was the realization that I got to as well, where at the start of the year, I would pre-plan things as well and say, right, we're taking a break here and here and here. And even when you go, I don't feel like I need to, the discipline of meant it was like interval training. Yeah, it was like sprints, 6 week block, go hard, have a break, go hard, break. And the years that I did that I had more time away from our practice, our businesses work, they were always our busiest years.
And I would,
funny as it sounds, it was counterintuitive.
It's so true though, right? And it is because your energy shifted. It has nothing to do with time. It has always to do with the energy and the energy you're bringing in. And then what you're highlighting is that, for most people who are watching this and listening to this, I know your listener, as you're listening to this, most likely you're some sort of an entrepreneurial minded thinker. Right? That's why you're listening to us. And when you're an entrepreneurial minded thinker, one of the key elements is that you don't want to go back to the same routine because it's not how you're built typically. There's usually two types of people, right? There's sort of like the hunters and the farmers, right? And there's nothing wrong with being a farmer, but the farmers are the one who loves routine, likes to go back to the sameness. They want to make sure everything's the same consistency. And those are great people. They're great employees because they're the ones who kind of tend to want to go back to some routine and knowing the certainty that everything's going to be exactly the same. They need that comfort. But for a hunter, which is more like an entrepreneur, they want to have they can't hunt the same path. They can't you can't go back to the same path and expect the animal to be there. That's not how the hunting works. Hunting means that you have to go different paths, search out different ways, and you find a way to find the right way to kind of hunt the animal. Well, it's the same thing from an entrepreneurial perspective. You are going to be more of someone who likes change. You want to change something in your routine, change something that excites you. You have that squirrel mentality where something, you got that, like, okay, that's exciting. That's a shiny object syndrome. We all have it to agree. But the thing is making sure that you're chasing things that it matters to you and a value that are value to you. But the most important thing I want to highlight here is to make sure that you are changing something. It could be a small thing in your business. So every break that I come back to is like, what's one element of change that I need to embrace myself to? What challenge do I need to kind of step into that I'm not stepping into? Or what projects that I've been scared of doing that I should be leaning towards? Because that prevents, I think, or at least lowers the probability of burnout, because that's what excites that entrepreneurial brain, that excites the entrepreneurial mind. And therefore, when you do something each and every single quarter, doing something that's different and challenging, exciting, I'm not talking like it has to double your business or anything, but sometimes it's just enough to excite you that goes, ooh, there's a bit of thrill there. And you chase it while still doing the rest of the things, because you still got to manage the rest of the things. But there's that one little thing that could help you elevate to that next level that could change your level of trajectory. And that's how we all improve. And that will, I think, is one of the cure for burnouts.
Yeah, like it. And, sometimes we've highlighted, I guess we focused on what happens when we plan for breaks. And so that's one strategy or process of managing burnout. The harder thing is when you're in it. And a lot of the times you'll see that you see it even in teams. A sporting team or a sports person can be classed as being out of form. They're just not performing at the level that they previously were. And there could be something emotional, physical, mental that's curtailing that performance. And it's a really interesting thing is like great coaches in those environments sometimes realize that trying harder is not the right strategy, because you already try harder. And I know that myself, sometimes when I've been in that situation, my default would be just work harder, just find another strategy, just go harder, double down. And that was counterproductive. And so a great coach in those situations would go, hey guys, we need to change the scenario, change the energy, as you said, Laurence. And we're not training today. I had coaches who did the same thing. Go, we're going bowling, we're going swimming, we're going to have a barbecue, or go and have dinner together as a team and bond and just reframe things. And suddenly you find that spark that you were missing. So, perhaps we can explore that in terms of a team may sometimes be underperforming, and it's purely because they've just been going too hard without the adequate rest as well.
Sometimes in a team environment, oftentimes you're going too hard or going after the same goals every single quarter or every single year, and without actually seeing any rewards from it. And we need that reward. We need that dopamine hit to kind of go, hey, like we're going somewhere. We're actually making a difference here. And so that's a challenge thing. So I think oftentimes also too is that you are not shifting up maybe the challenge. Maybe sometimes a team doesn't have enough challenge because you're so focused on your own personal goals that you forgot the team's goal. And sometimes it's about you as the owner or maybe as the leader, you've forgotten to link up the challenge that you actually have to a vision of what you're trying to create, or maybe you lost sense of the vision of what your business is about. Oftentimes, when do we most think about our vision? Usually when you create them, right? And I guarantee you, for 90% of you, if I asked your team what is the vision of the business, they probably don't know, because oh yeah, we did that one time, right? And it's because you felt good in the moment, like, all right, we created our vision, our values, awesome, but you never revisit it again. It's like, well, what's the point, right? It's like, and I think those are important things to kind of think about, is that the team leads to a burnout because we're not really re-engaging them what inspired them in the first place. That's why motivation is only temporary, right? What really helps is not motivation. What helps is consistency, right? Consistent, inspiring to move towards a singular vision. But that vision has to be reminded amongst your team and amongst yourself of why you do what you do. And so if you're in a position where you're lost at the moment, or you're feeling a bit burnt out, or not sure where you want to go in life, it's simply because of the fact that you have lost the spark. You have lost what you're doing, and you don't actually have clarity of where you're actually heading. So all you're doing is just pedaling, and you're riding or just driving around without actually a destination. That's okay to feel that way. I've been there many times. And Jim, I'm sure you would say the same thing. And the thing is that
Absolutely
right. But sometimes what we need to do is what you said, is like, gotta actually pull over, right? Stop. Like, don't run, to stop pedaling for a second, and then look at the map and go, where am I actually going? Rather than driving in a roundabout over and over again, because the world and society tells you got to keep moving, right? Why don't we just actually stop and go, like, I remember my wife does this all the time. She goes, I'm not sure where I'm going. So why don't you just pull over? And, like, sometimes it was like, I know you're right, but I don't want to admit to it, right? So I'm just going to keep driving until I figure it out. So, and then sometimes I go, okay, you're right. I'm just going to pull over here and actually punch in the map and figure out exactly what direction to go. But that's the same thing in life, right? Oftentimes we're just keep going because we're supposed to go, and that's what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to show up at 9 and finish at 5, and every day we show up, and then you go, have you ever asked yourself, what are you doing all this for? Right? Like, for what reason and for what purpose? And I think that's such an important question to ask every once in a while, because it highlights the fact that sometimes you've forgotten where you're supposed to go, and therefore reminds you. Or sometimes you're going, you know what? I thought I wanted that, but I don't no longer want it. Okay, that's a harder question to deal with, or answer to deal with. But at the same time, it forces you to go, at least going, okay, at least I know the direction I want to go or wanted to go in the past isn't the right direction. So maybe I need to clarify a new one. You might be sitting there on the side for a while to figure that out, but at least you figured it out now, rather than going, 10, 100 kilometers down the road and realizing, crap, I've been going on the wrong direction for all these years.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a little bit like the paradox between the paradox between activity and progress, where you lull yourself into thinking, "Hey, I'm actually really progressing because I'm active." When in actual fact, you could be going 100 kilometers in the wrong direction. And so that was the smirk. I went, guilty as charged. I've been guilty of that in the past. Something I want to circle back to. There's a thread that I picked up when you were talking, and you talked about people who are not stimulated and perhaps bored, and the other people. So you've got those components who be burnt out. So if there's people who aren't stimulated enough, or they don't have enough value buying into the vision of the organization, for example, there's a chance that they'll be burnt out. And there's other people whose tasks are so overwhelming at the other extreme that they're burnt out too. So for me, like, overwhelm and burnout can be either of those areas, which impact on both, whether you're understimulated or over extended. And as a result of that, you have basically, you're stretched in multiple directions, you get burnt out. So that's the component of it. And I loved what you were saying about the wisdom of just pulling over, because to me, when I was in burnout, one of the things that I learned, and I use as an example, was I imagined a circle, and I was inside the circle with everything that I was doing, all my commitments, everything. And what I did is I took everything out of the circle, everything that I was involved in, connected to, even the things that I loved doing. And at one stage, I walked away from jiu-jitsu for a couple of months, because I went, I'm going to take these out and detach the commitments from self, the obligations, and really determine whether I really want to do those. And when I did that, the things that I craved, the things that I wanted, I brought back into the circle. And the things that I didn't, they're still out there. And that to me was a strategy and a process of clarification, or pulling over and going, is this serving me? And do I want to keep going this way?
And that's the dark side of rituals, right? Like, I mean, we don't talk a lot about that because it's so hard to form a ritual and a habit. But the other side of it, I mean, the sliver downside is that you create rituals and habits that you continually doing, but without actually questioning it because you've done it for years, and it's just that could be exercise, doing something that you've always done and not realizing that was 20 years ago and I was a different person back then doing these things. So when you talked about about exercise, and I think we usually exercise a lot of as an analogy because I feel like that really translates to other parts of our lives. I remember one time I was doing CrossFit, and I was doing CrossFit consistently. I was probably doing about four times, maybe 5 times a week. And I remember there was a period of about 1 to 2 weeks where I just felt like, man, I'm tired. I'm getting up in the morning. I'm just really tired. I'm not lifting weights as hard. And I'm not sure what it is. Like, I'm just not pulling like the similar weights and patterns. I couldn't push in those limits. And I talked to my coach. I'm like, I don't know why I'm feeling this way. He goes, how many times are you doing this? And he's like, 4 or 5 times. And he goes, are you just doing CrossFit and no Metcon, which is, the metabolic conditioning? I'm like, no, I'm just doing straight CrossFit because I wanted to get better. And he goes, you're burnt out. He goes, my recommendation is take a week off. And I was like, what? Like, I was shocked, from a coach perspective. It's like, no, you need to take a week off. You need to, like, your nervous system is built. I mean, I was a freaking chiropractor back then by that. Like, I'm so dumb that not to recognize it. Like that my nervous system was so burnt out. Like I was so wired because I was jacking up my, every single workout. I was pushing myself to the extreme that I wasn't learning to take breaks. And now I'm a bit smarter now. Like I can feel like I go, you know what? Today, not today. I'm not going to, like, I'll work, but I'm not working at 100% capacity. I know I need to dial it down today because, maybe I'm a bit under the weather, or I can just feel my body is not, it's just not a realm. I don't have a whoop or anything like that, but I can just tell I just didn't get a good enough rest. Or after like a holiday, typically I don't jump into CrossFit right away. I typically do a week of like metabolic conditioning because I got to condition my body back, for not working out so much. So it's like, but that's the same analogy in life. It's like, you're so wired in your nervous system typically that you are so like your cortisol levels are so high because you're gone to go that you forget that that's what leads to this point of fatigue. It's mental fatigue, it's spiritual fatigue, and emotional fatigue. And this is why the breaks matter so much. But it's the breaks, I feel, is not just to get your physical, mental, and emotional settled, but I really think is an evaluation of the last quarter or the way I've done things. Is that the best way moving forward? And the analogy of you putting everything else in the circle and putting it back in, I think you should do that every quarter. I think you should really evaluate and go like, how do I value my last quarter? Give it a score, right? Out of 10, no sevens, right? Because everybody puts it a 7. So it's out an 8 or a 6, and you make a decision and go, okay, what worked, what didn't work? But then take everything out and go, what do I want to put back into this quarter in my life? And then maybe try out not to do some, certain foods or diets or, exercises so that you can get a different realm and different perspective to see how it goes. It might not work, but at least and then you can go back to those routines later in the next quarter.
What was a really big distinction for me was when I started measuring. I noticed I've got my smartwatch that I wear. I do track my heart rate variability, my HRV, and it's actually made a big difference in helping me avoid that, because I'll get up every morning and I'll measure that, and it gives me a reference. And because I'm not pushing, if I've got 6 out of 10 energy and I've got a workout that's a 9 or 10 out of 10, that's going to exhaust me. And so what I've gotten a lot better at doing is matching my energy levels to what my capacity is. And so as a result of that, I don't overextend myself. And I've actually been able to build in a more sustainable training schedule. And so, for example, that's the reason why I can't do CrossFit and jiu-jitsu at the same time. It just taxes my system too much. So I do my weights, but I do it in a different format that's not as intense. A lot of the younger guys, they'll do their CrossFit, and I just can't do it, myself, because it depletes myself. I used to get injured more often, and I'd just be exhausted. So they're the metrics that I use. Yes, as well as having someone on left and right shoulder go, hey, dude, you're looking too tired, take a week off. Because sometimes, let's face it, you and I have spoken on this before, we're driven. We want to get the best out of ourselves, and sometimes the warning signs either aren't big enough, or even if they're there, we're going to ignore them.
Yep.
So there have to be checks and balances that protect you sometimes from you,
Yep,
to ensure that you don't overextend yourself and you're in for the long game as opposed to just burning out.
It's interesting you brought up the smartwatch. I've never worn a smartwatch. The whole family has a smartwatch. I don't. I've thought about getting a Whoop. I've thought about getting an Apple Watch, but I'm always tempted. I'm always scared, actually, to be honest. And we can have a quick discussion around this. Like that, the data is not as accurate as I would like it to be, and the data then causes me to do things or not do things because of what the data says. Let's just say, and I don't know the truth of this. That's what I'm asking, is because just say I had a really good night's sleep and I feel great, and I look at my Whoop score or my Apple Watch and it goes, oh, you had a terrible sleep and your score is like 60 out of whatever, 100 or something. I'm like, God damn it. I felt pretty good and your data's telling me it. So then I'm get confused and I almost don't want to fall into that trap. So my question to you now, I don't know if you're not the expert, but at least maybe give your side of the story around that.
You know what? It's actually really funny you say that, because when you talk about having kids, and I remember our eldest son, he had a bit of trouble sleeping, and so I'd be coming to practice not of having slept exceptionally well, exhausted and tired, and the last thing you want people saying to you is, dude, you look terrible. And you go, I actually feel okay. And they go, no, look, you look terrible. And so then you start going through the mental gymnastics of, well, am I really tired? So I get what you're talking about, right? And there has to be, I was like that too, where I was like, no, I feel really good. And then I don't want to admit to myself that that's the case. But to me, it's the ultimate level of surrender. And I had to go through a process where I had to trust the data.
Okay.
And there were times where I'd go, I feel really tired. I'll look at it and it's telling you, dude, your heart rate variability is awesome. I'm like, I'm just dogging it here now. Get up and it kicks your butt like nobody else. But there are other times where you go, I feel really good, but your metrics don't show that. So you go, okay, I wonder why that is. Okay, I'm just going to listen to it. And what I find is when I do that, things like colds and I don't very rarely have anymore, because I'm not exceeding my capacity, my thresholds. Because my part would go, I'll just push, forget the data, but at some point I'd have to pay the piper. And the piper was 2 or 3 days being unwell, running through a healing crisis. So that's what it's done for me over the last 3 or 4 years.
Okay, all right.
Which has been really huge.
I'll think about it. I'm on that verge for sure.
But you have to I get it. There's a level of surrender to go, I don't want to give you control, data. I really don't. But the moment that you can embrace it and you go, okay, how can I use this data to help me? The days that it says you need to rest, I go, oh, okay, I'll rest. But the next day or the day after is like personal best. It's really phenomenal.
Well, I trust, usually I'm on top of these technology things and usually jump ahead and not wait. But for this, for some reason, for those scores and stuff, I kind of waited. But I feel like, technology improves so much now in the data and the collection and also just the readings of it. I think that's gone better. So I have more trust in it now, I guess, if I had to kind of make that argument. So we'll see. We might consider it.
But I totally get it. I don't think it's about a data, because I don't think it's about a data. It's even the smile on your face is the giveaway, Laurence. It's like, I don't want to give up control to something else. But I love the idea that I could go, hey, I feel it. I'm a good judge of myself, and I get all that. But there's something that you can't deny when you've got objective data. Of course. And you just go, okay, man, it's telling me there, and there's a reality check that I have to listen to. So I had to traverse that obstacle myself, actually. Yeah. So I get you, I understand you. Give it a go.
All right, so let's come back to burnout. I mean, obviously these are. One of the advice, I guess, from Jim is that get some data to avoid burnout, right? Because that's one of the most important things to actually to ensure. And there is some truth to that for sure. Because if you're not measuring, then you really don't know, and you're just basing it on gut feel and gut feel. We talked about how important that is, but sometimes that we could be intuitively wrong on those things. And I think having that information, because oftentimes, especially when it comes to burnout, I do agree with you. There is like, by the time you feel like you're burnt out, you're already burnt out. And I think that's so important to kind of make sure that we're doing the right things and getting that information properly, and not coming back too early. I think that's one of the kind of things that we wanted to talk about, is that, how does someone not come back too early from an injury, or from or recognizing that they are not in the right place to actually activate the full potential in certain things, or when to kind of pull back a little bit, or maybe say no to certain projects. What was your advice around that?
I think your coach, or actually your coach, was very wise in saying take a week off, but also you transitioning back into your normal routine is very wise as well. Metabolic training, you can't just parachute back into where you were a few weeks ago. Because there will have been a deconditioning component in there as well. It's one of the most biggest injustices in life, that it takes you 3 months to get a level of fitness and you'll drop it in 2 weeks. It's just the way that it is. So I think it's smart. The way you do that is metabolic training. And that's what I always do. Is if I've had an injury, or if I've had some time away from training, if I've had a week and I've been traveling, I don't go back into full scale 100% combat mode. I'll transition. I'll go through drills. I'll just take it easy. I'll do, half the session in terms of my combat and sparring, and just do that over a few days to adapt to that, to acclimatize, so to speak, to get myself ready. And it's the same reason. So yeah, what you had outlined that you intuitively do is pretty much what I do as well.
Yeah, sometimes just a quick update on the thumb. I don't think I actually mentioned it since since we kind of had the injury, but it's confirmed on X-ray is it actually a fracture, and there's a butterfly fracture in my thumb, and I didn't get the results until last week. But I knew intuitively there was a fracture because I went back to play paddle because I can grip a racket, shouldn't be a problem. But I forgot about the vibration when you hit the ball.
It goes all the way through.
You're like, okay, yeah, never thought about that. It's like it's not just about gripping the ball. It's about the vibration. And luckily I've been able to train. I've been able to work out for most things. I've been able to do most things on CrossFit. I actually haven't gone back to CrossFit since that time. Actually, funny enough, I haven't actually picked up a bar since I injured my thumb. I just avoided all those workouts simply for the fact that I just don't want to re-injure my, just basically giving it time to heal. But the mental capacity, like the mental toughness, the hard part is actually, I want to go play paddle. I want to go do those things, but it's like saying no and knowing I feel perfectly well.
Yeah.
And I'm losing ground here, at the same time watching everybody else, moving forward. And it's like that mental capacity of just being able to like let go and going, no, let's give it a fracture is going to take 6 to 8 weeks, no matter how much I fast track this, no matter how fast I'm healing. I'm getting older now. So it's going to take that 60 weeks. Just allow that 6 to 8 week process to go through. Like that's tough, right? To say no to things, to go like, I feel perfectly fine. And they've been tempted this week just to kind of get back in there. I'm like, oh, they're missing a player. I should just join. I'm like, no, like just give it another, like it's only one more week. It's only another couple more weeks. Let's just let it be. And that's hard. And that comes when it comes to business, or it comes to, for relationships or whatever, there's always that temptation. Like, oh, I think I can go back in there. But that's what happens a lot of times, especially in pro sports. A lot of people just go back in there too early. And what you're actually doing a disadvantage for your whole entire team, especially if you're playing in a team sport, because all you're doing is that, you might have got the best out of you from that one game, but then you're out now put yourself in a position where you can't recover. And I've been watching this Netflix doco on the Tour de France right now. And
I saw it advertised.
Yeah. And I've been watching that, and like, that's a grueling event, right? 21 days of like just riding. And these guys are just pounding themselves every day, and then got to get back on there, recover, and then got to get back on there and do it. It's such a fascinating sport. I don't tend to watch it that much, but like, and every time I remember one time in Australia, I was watching it, and I was like, this is actually fascinating to watch. I was like staying up at midnight watching the Tour de France. I'm like, I never thought I'd be watching cycling.
We don't have to do that.
Yeah, we don't exactly. We can actually do it at one time.
Watch it it's so good. Proper times.
And it's so interesting to kind of see like how when they know that they have to go, okay, we have to change strategies here because our top riders gone down, or they're not performing as well, and they just know that the fatigue is catching on, and then so they change strategy along the way. And I think we need to kind of consider doing that, right? And sometimes the riders themselves don't think that they're always pushing themselves, they're always kind of finding that their limit, but it's usually the team manager going, no, listen, you're just not performing that well. We're going to have to drop you from the top rider. We're going to push this guy to be the top rider. And that sometimes it could be a damage to the ego. But sometimes we need that. We need someone to kind of maybe throttle us down because we're probably our worst own enemy sometimes. Not a lot. Most of us may not have the natural discipline, especially if you're a driver and you're an accelerator, someone who's just constantly push, a type A personality. You might not find that the down switch because you think you can conquer all. You still think you're in your 20s. But reality, as we get older, you don't heal as well. I know I'm not healing as well as I could have been if I was in my 20 years old. Like, sure, can I push through it? I probably can, but what's the detriment? And I see this often, especially when I play paddle with these guys. We're playing with, 40, 50-year-olds, all right, who probably haven't played active sport like this probably for about 20 years. And now they're getting in there playing 2 or 3 times a week, thinking everything's okay. And got a small little injury here and they keep on pushing it. And then, I've had people who had snapped bicep tendons, their tennis elbows are so injured, they got to take 6 months off. It's like, I don't want to be in that position. I'd rather take a couple of weeks off, so I don't have to continue to play rather than having to stop playing altogether for 6 months and then also stop my workouts because I can't move my arm. So it's just being smart about your life and also not physical. This is a physical analogy to also the mental analogy in life as well.
Yeah, I think you highlighted a very good point there. And that's what I want to coattail on from Laurence, is that in professional sports, the moment that the activity is over, they kick into recovery mode. So, there are teams that play interstate. There were especially some AFL football teams that I knew who were playing. They had a really short turnaround time in between games. And to optimize the team recovery, what they did is they privately chartered a plane to fly at a lower altitude to cause less inflammation in the players' legs so they could recover faster. Right. So we hear of athletes, you see them, footballers, the next morning, the day after the game, they're either in ice baths or they're in the beach, basically decreasing inflammation in their body. So they're active recovery. We can take that as an example in parallel and put it to other areas of the world and go, if you are going to perform in your life, in your work, in your business, what is your recovery process? Where is your downtime? That to me is what prevents burnout and allows you to keep performing. The recovery could be go out there and go take a kid to the park, have fun, just find the joy in things, or have some time with your significant other and reconnect with why you're doing what you're doing, or just go out there and, go to your own footy game and watch it and cheer and carry on and just rechange the perspective of things. If that is what juices you and inspires you and is part of your active recovery, that allow you to turn up Monday, recharge as a better version of yourself.
Recovery is such an important element. Like I remember, I was coached by Jeff Spencer, who was my mindset coach for many years. And he was part of the Tour de France teams, for over 9 years or so. And one of the things he said, like, they're traveling from place to place for 21 days during the Tour de France. And, one of the most important things is recovery. Well, how do you recover? You sleep. So instead of sleeping on a different hotel bed every single night, they brought their own mattresses. As silly as that sounds, right? To bring your own mattress, but it's like, this is the most important thing. This is what we dedicate our life for. We're going to, pack a mattresses to sleep. So because that's what our routine is, and we're going to recover the best, not chancing that, you're going to get a crappy mattress at a hotel. So they'll throw away whatever, put aside the other mattress, put on their own mattress, and they will sleep. If the team can do that and can carry it and actually be part of the team to do that and and to supply that, then you want to make sure you can do that. So recovery is such an important element. I think sometimes but here's the downside of what we're just talking about. We're using a lot of sports analogies, right? But what we're seeing is game time. We see these awesome players, put in 2 hours of effort, or 3 hours of effort, or maybe 4 hours of effort, like to the maximum potential of their ability. Then we go, oh, then we got to do that too. And then we go back to our gym and push ourselves in our business and our workouts. But you forget to see, you don't see them, especially let's say NFL football. They play on Sundays, but guess what they're doing between Monday and Saturday, right? They're recovering and prepping up for the next week, which means they go in there and go hard for 2 to 3 hours, and then they go recover for the next 6 days. Most of us don't have a job that we go in for 2 hours and then have 6 days to recover, right? Most of us are constantly going in and day out. And that's the problem. We think that we can translate, look at these athletes, look at these sports. I want to translate that mental mentality into our life. Yeah, but they have recovery time. You just don't see it. That's not documented, and therefore what we got to remind ourselves, like, where's your downtime? If you're pushing yourself to midnight every single night, 2 o'clock in the morning and getting up at 5 a.m., like that's not necessarily the smartest move, because that's not what an athlete would do. Right. If they're pro sports, and then that's the same thing. We have to have the mentality. What we got to think about is like, how far are we pushing it, and how far, what is our downtime? What is our recovery time? if you're constantly on these devices all the time and you never stop working when you come home, like where's your downtime from the physicality and the emotional and the spiritual thing that we've been talking about? And that's what that can also making sure that you prevent the burnout situation.
Yeah, and I guess the final thing that I would say too is the most relevant time of burnout for us was with young kids, and sometimes just the remedy for burnout would be to have someone come over, look after the kids for a few hours, so Bettina and I could just go out and have dinner together and just enjoy each other's company and just recharge. And sometimes it's as simple as that. It's reconnecting to the things taking you away. And the best part is you come back and you'd reappreciate your kids again because you had a break. You had a time away. Everybody got to have some space and nurture and have those needs met, where you just had some time to regroup, recharge, have an adult conversation, for example. And it just changed everything. So to me, the ultimate, I agree with you totally, is the breaks. Plan your breaks along the way and work towards them. But sometimes build in on your day-to-day strategies and processes to down-regulate that stress response, just to take some of the rocks off your backpack and simplify the process so that you're not constantly push. I think that's probably the biggest learning that I've learned over time.
With kids, I've had so many clients that, are just in that stage of having their first child. And I've had multiple conversations, and it makes me feel old, but it's like, wisdom from my experience as a father, my first time being a father. And you go back and you got to remind these these adults who have been, who've never had kids before, and they've been pushing hard, and it's great to see them succeed. But when they're trying to plan their life, it goes, okay, well, I'll do this and this and this. Then we'll have the baby here, and then we'll do this. I'm like, I think you're over planning. Like, I think I think you're underestimating the toll, physical, emotional toll that your child's going to have on you and your family. Now, it may not be so much on you, but I think you're underestimating the toll that it might take on your wife or your partner. And I think those are something that you see, I hear all the time. They're planning their life pre-kids to almost exactly the same post-kids. And it's just that, we just got an extra kid. Now, you may, and I always say to this, I'm like, I understand that you may be the lucky parent that that your child's perfect and sleeps perfectly fine or whatever, but you rather budget and also plan accordingly for the almost not the worst case, but the most typical scenarios of raising a newborn, and also plan according to that. And then if things go really, really well for whatever reason, then sure, then add something to it, rather than planning for perfection. Just like me, who my first child, I'm like, my daughter was supposed to be born on in August of 2008. I'm like, perfect, 888, right? August the 8th, 2008. It was China's Olympics first.
Using your feng shui.
Yeah, it was China's first day of the Olympics. I'm like, I'll take 3 weeks off. Be great. Have a child. I would get to watch the whole Olympics, right? I never saw, she came in on the 5th and never saw the Olympics for 3 weeks because I basically didn't know what the hell I was doing for 3 weeks. I was just like a blur. Yeah. And that's the thing. Like, you have a great plan, right? Mike Tyson always says, everybody has a plan until you get punched in the face. So that's exactly what happened. And I think the reason why I'm sharing this story is because oftentimes we're always planning for the best scenarios. And that's not necessarily the best way to plan. I think the best way to plan is what, the Air Force does. They when they go into a mission, they always plan 3 scenarios. They plan the best case scenarios, the worst case scenarios, and the most likely scenarios. And they go through each scenarios because they want to make sure that they know how to adapt in whatever scenario occurs, and they already know what to do. Most of us plan for the best case scenario, and that never happens. And all of a sudden now we have no idea. In mid-flight, we don't know what we're doing. And so I think it's important when we're talking about strategies like what we've been discussing, whether it be, avoiding burnouts or, navigating burnouts, or even anything we've been talking about, it's really important to make sure you have 3 different scenarios and make sure you've thought about the worst case scenarios. We're thinking about what could possibly go wrong, because nothing goes to plan. And therefore, how to adapt accordingly because you've at least thought it through, and how your escape routes and different routes to kind of get there. I think that would be my last ending advice when it comes to, on the topic of burnout, how to avoid it, how to navigate through it. So I hope that has been insightful. I hope this has been helpful. I hope that, share that, hey, you're not alone if you're experiencing this right now. And if you are experiencing a point in your career and life where you just, I don't know if I'm meant to do this. I encourage you to kind of seek out help, encourage you to seek out Jim or my help to kind of find some guidance and perspective that you might need. And listen, Jim and I are actually running this great event called Practice and Beyond. Love for you to sign up for it. Go look for it's going to be coming in Barcelona, in Jim's hometown, at the moment in November. And so go to practiceandbeyond.co. That's practiceandbeyond.co. Sign up for any new information that we're going to be coming. We'll be launching the ticket sales very shortly. But this is a great way. This is a perfect opportunity for those who specifically who are entrepreneurial chiropractors. This is a great event for us because we want to talk a lot about things around of what else could be available to you just other than practice. So guys, I hope this has been insightful. A Wabi Sabi episode. Please, again, share this episode with others. And Jim, always a great pleasure to co-host this show with you, and I look forward to next week's episode.